I knew they were going to come out with their hair on fire. Once Ja'Marr Chase said what he said about the L's, I caught that on video the other day, and I ended up writing about it. And then, of course, then we had to ask Myles Garrett and everyone else the next day about it, and Myles Garrett said he felt disrespected. I talked to a couple.
Sometimes grown-ups need to lie.
I'd say this, Mary Kay. Myles is a career Brown. He is one of the faces of our organization. I think we've been very clear, both past and present, in terms of our feelings on that. So I understand all the questions. I'll be honest, I don't really want to waste a ton more breath on it. Sure, but
only had one offensive lineman a visit to Berea, reportedly.
I'd say I'd say this, Tony. I would not. Can't believe everything you read.
So there have had, yeah. Well, I think we've actually had a lot.
Something serious is happening inside the Cleveland Browns organization right now, and most people still don't understand how deep this goes. This is not just about media access getting limited. This is about control, power, and a front office finally saying enough. Because behind the scenes, Andrew Berry is not playing games anymore. He's stepping forward, standing next to Shedeur Sanders and drawing a line that the media cannot cross. And the message is loud and clear. If you've been pushing narratives, twisting stories, or quietly trying to tear down this locker room, your access is done. Let's be real for a second. Criticism is part of sports, everyone understands that. If a quarterback misses throws, if a team struggles, if decisions don't work, fine, talk about it. That's the job. But what started happening around Shedeur Sanders was not normal coverage anymore. It wasn't just, he needs to improve here, or he struggled in this situation. It turned into constant questioning of who he is as a person, his leadership, his mindset, his character. And that's where things cross the line. Because once the conversation leaves the field and starts targeting the person, that's no longer analysis.
State unequivocally that you're not trading Myles Garrett?
I'd say this, Mary Kay. Myles is a career Brown. He is one of the faces of our organization. I think we've been very clear, both past and present, in terms of our feelings on that. So I understand all the questions. I'll be honest, I don't really want to waste a ton more breath on the topic.
Do you know what it takes for a general manager to tell a reporter, I don't want to waste no more of my breath on that topic? Next question. Ooh. You see, the thing about plots is when you're actually exposed. What you're seeing in real time, and I'm just being honest with you, what you're seeing in real time is people trying to find any sort of crack, crevice, ledge, footholding to stay afloat. What do you mean by that, G. Bush? Andrew Berry is well aware of who was leaking information.
That's narrative building. And Andrew Berry saw all of it. Quiet at first, observing, letting things play out. But make no mistake, he was paying attention to every headline, every segment, every whisper coming out of that media circle. He saw how certain voices kept repeating the same tone, the same angle, the same negative framing around Shedeur Sanders, almost like they were trying to shape how fans should feel before the season even begins. And now, he's done watching. This move, cutting off access, tightening the circle, is not random. It's calculated. It's intentional. It's protection. Because here's what people don't want to admit. When a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders walks into a situation like this, the environment matters. Confidence matters. Trust matters. And when you have media constantly throwing shade, questioning everything beyond football, it creates noise, distractions, pressure that has nothing to do with performance. And Berry understands that if this team is going to move forward, if this offense is going to be built around Shedeur the right way, that noise has to be eliminated completely. This is where it gets even more interesting. Because this is not just about defending one player. This is about resetting the entire relationship between the organization and the media. For years, insiders had access, influence, and the ability to shape conversations around the Browns. They were inside the building, around the team, close enough to control narratives. But now, that door is closing. Slowly but clearly. And the people who got comfortable being part of that inner circle are starting to realize they are no longer needed the same way. And let's not ignore the timing here. New leadership energy, new direction, new priorities. This is Andrew Berry making it clear that the Browns are no longer going to operate like they used to. No more letting outside voices dictate internal perception. No more allowing repeated negativity to become the story.
Andrew Berry is well aware of what individuals had that information leaked to. Andrew Berry is well aware that when Kevin Stefanski got fired, a large contingency of the media said he should be fired too. They even insinuated that Kevin should be his boss. They also insinuated that one of the reasons Kevin's got let go is because of the Deshaun Watson contract, and the Watson contract destroyed everybody. They also insinuated that it wasn't Kevin's fault because Shedeur was just too dumb or lazy to play good football last year. Now, when you are saying these things in the public sphere in real time, you do know that they're going to hear these things. You do understand that makes your job more difficult because there's nobody else in the building that you can rely on for any solid information. So what happens when you are given information for a long period of time?
If you're not contributing to building this team up, if you're not keeping things fair and focused on football, you're not getting the same level of access. Simple as that. Now think about what that does to the entire dynamic. Suddenly, the media doesn't control the narrative as easily. Suddenly, the loudest critics don't have the same platform inside the building. Suddenly, players, especially Shedeur Sanders, get a chance to develop without constant off-field noise hanging over every move they make. That's not weakness. That's strategy. That's leadership stepping in and protecting its investment. And whether people like it or not, this is sending a message across the league. The Browns are choosing their quarterback, choosing their culture, and choosing who gets to be part of that process. Andrew Berry is not asking for approval. He's not negotiating with narratives. He's taking control of the situation and making sure that what's happening inside that building stays focused, disciplined, and aligned with the future they are trying to build around Shedeur Sanders. And right now, that future is being protected at all costs. Now let's talk about what really pushed Andrew Berry to make this move, because this didn't happen overnight. This wasn't one bad article or one hot take that crossed the line. This was a pattern, repeated again and again, slowly building into something that the Cleveland Browns front office could no longer ignore. And at the center of that pattern, the way the media kept circling back to Shedeur Sanders with the same negative tone every single time. You could see it if you paid attention. Every discussion about Shedeur somehow turned into doubt, not just about his performance, but about his presence, his leadership, even his mentality. And here's the problem. Most of it wasn't based on real evidence. It was speculation dressed up as analysis. It was opinions being pushed as facts. And once that kind of coverage starts repeating across multiple voices, it creates something dangerous. A narrative that feels real even when it isn't. That's how media influence works. Not always loud, not always obvious, but constant. A comment here, a question there, a headline that leans negative, a segment that frames things a certain way. Over time, it builds. Fans start to hear the same doubts over and over again. Conversations shift. Suddenly, people are not watching the player. They're reacting to the story being told about the player. And in this case, that story around Shedeur Sanders was being shaped before he even had the chance to fully prove himself. Andrew Berry saw that happening in real time. And here's what makes this different. He didn't wait for it to spiral out of control. He didn't sit back and hope it would fix itself. He stepped in early. Because from his perspective, this isn't just about media fairness. This is about protecting the development of a quarterback the organization is clearly investing in. Think about it. If you're building around Shedeur Sanders, if you believe he's your guy, why would you allow constant external negativity to grow unchecked? Why would you give full access to voices that are consistently pushing doubt instead of balance? That doesn't help the team. That doesn't help the locker room.
And you don't have a foundation of football built around that, What happens when the information is taken? Follow me here. If I'm in a game and I just know based on what I'm writing is based on what somebody telling me, when people stop telling you stuff, what do you have to fall back on? If it's not your playing experience, if it's not your film work, if it's not watching tape, if it's not understanding the game of football, if it's not doing scouting, if it's not being around and understanding what plays look like and how, if you get that voice taken away that's telling you what to write, what happens next? You start saying, I'm going to take Ty Simpson at 6. You'll start to say Malik Willis for $30 million is worth it. You'll start to actually say, why can't we get Kyler Murray? Because what happens is the foundation and principles of what your football knowledge is and sports knowledge has now been reduced to things that you don't necessarily know or have taken the time to develop.
And it definitely doesn't help a young quarterback trying to establish himself at the highest level. And this is where the line gets drawn clearly. There is a difference between honest critique and narrative stacking. Honest critique says he needs to improve here, he struggled there, here's what he can do better. That's fair, that's part of the game. But narrative stacking? That's when every conversation leans one way. Every takeaway sounds the same. Every report carries the same underlying message. That's not analysis anymore, that's influence. The Browns front office recognized that shift. And instead of confronting it publicly, instead of turning it into a back and forth with reporters, they made a quieter but more powerful decision. Limit access. Control the environment. Change who gets close to the team and who doesn't. Because access is power. And once you remove that access, you remove the ability to constantly shape the story from the inside. And let's be honest, this is what's really shaking people up. It's not just that some reporters might lose interviews or inside information, it's that they're losing proximity, losing that direct line to the team that allowed them to stay ahead of the narrative. And without that, everything changes. Suddenly, the same voices don't carry the same weight. Suddenly, the Browns control how much gets out and how it gets framed. Meanwhile, inside the building, things look very different. Instead of constant outside noise, the focus shifts back to football, development, chemistry, execution. Shedeur Sanders is no longer being surrounded by daily speculation about who he is. He's being evaluated based on what he actually does on the field and inside the system. That's a completely different environment, a healthier one. And make no mistake, this isn't just a short-term reaction. This is Andrew Berry setting a tone, a standard. If you're going to cover this team, it has to be fair. It has to be grounded. Because if it turns into constant negativity without substance, you're not getting the same level of access anymore. That's the new reality. And now this situation is starting to get personal. Because certain names are no longer just part of the conversation, they are at the center of it. One of the biggest being Mary Kay Cabot, a longtime voice around the Cleveland Browns who, for years, had direct access and influence inside that building. But now, that same access is being questioned, reduced, maybe even completely cut off. And that shift is sending a message louder than any press conference ever could. Because when someone like Mary Kay Cabot starts losing access, that's not random. That's not a small adjustment. That's the organization saying, we see what's been happening, and we're not going to keep allowing it. And again, this isn't about silencing criticism. It's about addressing what the team views as repeated, negative framing that goes beyond football. The kind of coverage that keeps circling back to doubt, keeps highlighting concerns about Shedeur Sanders in a way that feels less like evaluation and more like positioning. Think about how powerful insider access really is.
So when that rug is pulled, your foundation is built on soft sand. It's not built on rocks. It's not built on granite. It's not built on a solid stone foundation that says, no matter what Andrew Berry or who tell me in that organization, I always have an eye to understand and to put things together in context based on what I see, what I know, my experience level. And what you're saying today is, if you don't have any information, just throw things out there. Just throw it out there. Let me bring you to this. Let me just show you something. Let me show you something real quick. Where is that?
When a reporter is close to the team, When they have sources, when they're consistently around practices and conversations, their words carry extra weight. Fans trust it more. Other outlets repeat it. It becomes the foundation of the entire narrative. So if that narrative starts leaning heavily in one direction, especially negative, that influence spreads fast. And that's exactly what the Browns appear to be pushing back against. Because from the organization's point of view, it's not just about one article or one comment, it's about the accumulation, the pattern, the tone that keeps showing up again and again. And when that tone starts to affect how players are perceived, especially a key figure like Shedeur Sanders, that's when leadership steps in. That's when Andrew Berry and the front office decide enough is enough. And here's where it gets even more intense. Reports and reactions are starting to suggest that conversations between the team and certain media members have become cold, short, direct. No more long explanations, no more patience for repeated angles. Just a clear signal. If the coverage doesn't align with fair evaluation, the relationship is going to change. That's a massive shift from how things usually operate in the NFL. Because normally teams tolerate a lot. They deal with criticism, speculation, even unfair takes because that's part of being in the spotlight. But this feels different. This feels like a front office that has identified specific patterns and decided they're no longer acceptable. Not when it affects the locker room. Not when it targets the identity of players. And definitely not when it centers around the quarterback they're trying to build around. And let's be real, this puts the media in a tough position. Because now they have to adjust. They have to rethink how they approach the team. The same style of reporting that worked before might not work anymore. The same tone that once got attention might now lead to less access. That changes everything. It forces a shift in how stories are told, how questions are asked, and how narratives are built. At the same time, it also raises a bigger question. Who controls the story of a team, the media or the organization itself? Because right now, the Browns are clearly choosing to take that control back. They're deciding who gets close, who gets information, and who gets to shape the conversation around their players. And when you combine that with their commitment to Shedeur Sanders, it becomes very clear what direction they're moving in. Inside the building, this likely feels like protection, like stability, like a reset of priorities. But outside, it feels like tension, like a battle between access and accountability. And that tension is only going to grow the more this situation develops. Because once access starts getting cut, once certain voices are pushed further away, the entire media landscape around the team changes. New voices might rise, old ones might lose influence, and the way fans receive information about the Browns could look completely different by the time the season starts. And this is where the conversation flips completely. Because now people are starting to ask a bigger question. What if the Cleveland Browns are actually right to do this? What if this isn't about control in a negative way, but about protecting a locker room that's been dealing with constant outside pressure for way too long? Because when you really break it down, the situation around Shedeur Sanders wasn't just normal criticism. It was turning into something heavier, something that could impact how a young quarterback is viewed before he even fully gets his shot. And that matters more than people want to admit. In today's league, perception can shape reality. If a player is constantly surrounded by doubt in the media, that narrative starts to follow him everywhere. Fans repeat it. Analysts build on it. Opposing teams even hear it. Suddenly, a player isn't just playing football. He's playing against a story that's already been written about him. And for someone like Shedeur Sanders, stepping into a high-pressure situation, that kind of environment can either build confidence or slowly chip away at it. That's exactly what Andrew Berry seems to be trying to stop before it grows any further. Because from a front office perspective, this is not just about media relations, it's about asset protection. You invest in a quarterback. You build a system around him. You shape the roster to support him. The last thing you want is constant outside noise interfering with that process. And if limiting access helps create a more controlled, focused environment, then from their point of view, it's a smart move. Now, of course, not everyone is going to agree with that. There are people who believe media access is important, that transparency matters, that teams should be open to scrutiny, and that's fair. That's part of how the league operates. But here's the tension. What happens when that access starts being used in a way the team sees as harmful rather than helpful? What happens when coverage repeatedly leans negative without strong evidence, especially toward key players? That's where the Browns are drawing the line. They're not saying no criticism allowed. They're saying if the coverage starts affecting the internal environment, if it goes beyond football and into constant questioning of identity and leadership, then access is no longer guaranteed. That's a completely different stance from what we usually see, and it's why this situation feels so intense right now. Because let's not ignore this part either. This move also changes how players view the organization. When a front office steps in and protects its quarterback, that sends a message inside the locker room. It tells everyone, we've got your back. It builds trust. It builds unity. And for a team trying to establish a new identity, especially around Shedeur Sanders, that kind of internal belief can be powerful. At the same time, it also puts more pressure on Shedeur himself, because now the organization is clearly backing him, clearly investing in him, clearly shaping the environment around him. That means expectations go up. Attention goes up. Every performance matters even more. And while the media noise might be reduced on the inside, the spotlight on him from the outside isn't going anywhere. So this becomes a balance. Protection versus pressure. Control versus perception. The Browns are trying to create the best possible conditions for their quarterback to succeed, but in doing so, they're also stepping into a much bigger conversation about media influence, team control, and where that line should be drawn in today's NFL. And this is why the entire league is quietly watching. Because if this works, if Shedeur Sanders develops, performs, and proves himself in an environment with limited negative media influence, other teams might start thinking the same way. They might start questioning how much access is too much, how much narrative control they should allow, and whether protecting their players from constant outside noise is actually the smarter move in the long run. And now everything comes down to results. Because at the end of the day, all of this, every restriction, every decision, every move by Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns, is going to be judged by what happens on the field. That's the reality. You can shut out noise. You can reshape the media landscape around your team. You can protect your quarterback from negative narratives. But if it doesn't translate into performance, the criticism is only going to come back louder than ever. And that puts Shedeur Sanders right at the center of everything. Because whether it's fair or not, he is now the face of this entire shift, the player the organization is clearly backing, the one they are building around, the one they are protecting. And when a team makes that kind of commitment, expectations don't just rise, they explode. Every throw, every read, every decision he makes is going to be under a microscope. Not just from fans, but from the same media voices that are now being pushed further away. And you already know what that means. There's going to be pressure to prove that the Browns made the right call. Pressure to show that all of this, cutting access, controlling narratives, defending their quarterback, was worth it. But here's the other side of that, the opportunity. Because if Shedeur steps into this situation and delivers, if he shows growth, confidence, leadership, and production, then everything changes. Suddenly, the narrative flips completely. The same voices that doubted him have to adjust. The same stories that questioned him lose their foundation. And the Browns? They look like they saw something before everyone else did. That's the gamble Andrew Berry is making. Not just betting on talent, but betting on environment. Betting that by removing distractions, by limiting negative influence, by keeping the focus internal, they can accelerate the development of their quarterback. And if that works, it doesn't just help Shedeur Sanders. It validates the entire strategy. Because think about how rare this is. Teams usually react to media pressure. They don't control it. They respond, they explain, they defend. But the Browns? They flipped it. They said, we're not going to play that game anymore. And that kind of approach either makes you look like a genius or puts you under even more scrutiny if things don't go the right way. And let's not forget, the media isn't going anywhere. Just because access is limited doesn't mean coverage stops. If anything, it might get even more intense. More speculation, more outside analysis, more people trying to figure out what's happening behind closed doors. That's just how this works. So while the Browns can control what happens inside the building, they can't completely control how the story is told outside of it. That's why performance becomes everything. Because the fastest way to silence doubt isn't through statements or restrictions. It's through results. Winning games, executing at a high level, showing clear progress. If Shedeur Sanders does that, then all the noise fades. All the narratives lose power. And the Browns take full control of their story again. But if things don't click right away, that's when the pressure spikes. That's when people start questioning the decisions. That's when the same media voices come back even stronger, pointing at every mistake, every struggle, every missed opportunity. And suddenly the conversation isn't just about Shedeur. It's about whether the Browns handled the situation the right way at all. So this is where everything connects. The media attention, the access restrictions, the protection of the quarterback. It all leads to one moment, the season. Because once the games start, there are no narratives strong enough to override what people see on the field. That's the ultimate truth in this league. Made his move, and he made it loud. The media doesn't get to shape this team anymore. The focus is locked in, the noise is being cut out, and everything is now centered around one name, Shedeur Sanders. No more distractions. No more constant negative narratives hanging over the locker room. Just football development and proving people wrong on the field. But now the pressure is real. Because when you make a move like this, you better be right. If Shedeur delivers, the Browns look like geniuses. If he doesn't, every single decision is going to get questioned even louder. That's the risk, and they are fully embracing it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Browns made the right move cutting off the media? And are you buying into Shedeur Sanders as the future of this franchise? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Because this story is only getting bigger.